Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Soul Survivor podcast. Ryan and I are back to discuss episode 9 of Survivor 47. What's up, Ryan?
Dylan, I'm doing great. Chaos. That's all I can say after this week. Chaos with the challenge and the twist. Chaos before tribal. Chaos at tribal council. So a lot to break down.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that we have to wait due to our schedules. We got to wait all the way until Sunday to talk about it, but I can't wait to talk about it because there's so much to unpack here. Let's just start by saying I want to give Survivor credit. I thought this was one of the better episodes of the new era. Definitely one of the best of the season so far. I was so into the pre-tribal chaos and mid-tribal chaos. It was awesome to watch, in my opinion. Genevieve pulls off a ridiculous move. When I say ridiculous, it could mean good or bad. That's what we're going to talk about today, Yep. She pulls off a very, I'll call it savvy move, by getting out Soul, something that I did not expect. I don't think you expected Soul to be in danger going into the episode. I mean, we spent all of last podcast talking about how the Lavo, the Red Tribe 3 were in a great spot. And here it is. They turn on each other before anybody even has a chance to. So let's start right here, Ryan. What were your thoughts on the move that Genevieve made to get out Soul this week? So much to talk about.
Yeah, so obviously, like you said, I'm very sad Soul's gone. I think Soul was one of our favorites. I was talking to some friends. They love Soul as well. Just was a great fun character on the show. And also he kind of had that thing to him where he was trying to make some moves, but then Rome completely just shut him off the first half of the game. Then he gets past Rome and you're like, okay, Soul can make a breakthrough here. And then it all falls apart. So I'm very, very sad to lose Soul. Yeah, Genevieve's move. So we can get into it. And then we also, for those listening, we might break down one or two things from Soul's exit press just to let you know ahead of time. But it's a very interesting move from Genevieve because on one hand, she's basically saying the same thing she mentioned last week against Sierra, where with the way the new era has evolved, she wants to target these sneaky, social, savvy players that always kind of sneak through because you always vote out the big dogs, the big guys, like the big outwardly strategic threats like your Shans or whatnot. Like the new era has basically been like, we got to shift our mindset to now target the savvy people before it gets too late and they're taking all the spots at the end. So I see where the idea comes from. But I think the biggest problem for me, and I want to hear your thoughts too, is is it the right move for Genevieve to target Soul here? Because yes, even though Soul is a savvy player and Soul can make his way through, I don't think he was going to go for Genevieve anytime soon. And Genevieve's also I'm trying to get revenge for Rome or whatever. So I don't know if it was the right move for her. And then also Andy wanted to continue to work with Soul and he jumped on board. Rachel had to jump on board. I'm really wondering who was this the best move for? If I had to guess, I would think the Tuku people. I think the Gabes and whatnot. I think they probably benefit from Soul being gone. But a lot of people here, I don't know if they benefit from Soul leaving. I don't know.
It's tough. I've gone back and forth literally since the episode aired about whether it was a good move or not. At first, I was leaning towards yes, really good move. Then as literally 30 minutes after the episode ended, I was like, you know what? That was maybe too soon. I don't know if that was the right move. And then I started to hear arguments and I swung back the pendulum of I think it was a really good move. And then I read the exit press and which we'll get into later. And I was like, oh, that might not have been a good move. And now I'm still kind of in the middle. I really haven't decided yet if I think it was a good move. But if I had to pick one, I'm leaning towards the fact that I do think it was a good move.
For who?
For Genevieve.
Okay.
Again, is it possible that it was too soon? Yes. But at the end of the day, it's so tough to gauge when to make your move. We saw Gabler make a big move at Final 12 or whatever, and it ends up being his game-winning move that he uses to argue at the end, right? In this case, we hear Kyle talking about Genevieve oh, I don't even know if there's strategy in her. And we hear Gabe saying similar stuff, right? So to me, it's I'm sure that Genevieve felt first of all, we've seen her make this type of move before. We saw it with Keyshawn. every time they show Genevieve at work, I get so super excited. I think Genevieve's my favorite on the season right now. I just love watching her play Survivor. She is, regardless of whether this was the correct move or not, I think you could pretty much say that she, in my opinion, I think she's one of the best new era players, in my opinion, in terms of how she operates. The way that she's able to string plans and moves together it's a skill that is very rare, very rare. And I do think that, the reason why I'm leaning towards the fact that it's a good move, I think eventually you have to make your move. Otherwise, you're going to coast to the end and everyone's going to be like, well, we like you, but like, did he really do anything? Like, could you explain your game well? She had to make her move eventually. Now I think you vote out Soul, who clearly Genevieve's whole strategy this whole game has been to get out the low-key threats, the Mariannes of the world, the Kenzies of the world, right? The D's of the world, the people that are really good socially, who you might not see coming, the people who are the archetype of the new era winner is who she's been, gunning for. And then she figures that once, it gets whittled down, all of a sudden you could just be like, oh, well, Kyle's an obvious boot now. He's a great physical threat. Oh, well, Gabe's a huge threat now. He's been trying to make a big move the whole game, and it's clear to everybody. Oh, Sam's still a big physical threat. He's an easy vote also. And now all of a sudden, you vote out all those people in a row that are clear and obvious threats, and you have Genevieve sitting at the final 5 or final 6. And I think what her plan is. I also think she's trying to set up her end game in the best case possible. Clearly she had no interest in going to the final 3 with Soul, which again, she still could have potentially waited to get at Soul. But I do think, probably, all of a sudden, if Soul skates by a few boats, let's say next episode, people are like, oh, well, Kyle lost immunity. He needs to go. And then it's like, you know what? Like, the odds are is that, the odds become higher that you're sitting next to Soul at the final. So now you vote at Soul, right? I've seen people make an argument that it lowers Lavo's threat level because now it's only 2 of them. I've seen people make an argument that, and I think this is true, right? You see people make an argument that Tuku now has 4 of the final 9, right? Which makes it should make it extremely crucial for the other 5 to band together and get out of Tuku next vote. And I think that is what she wanted to set up with this vote, to make the Tuku's obvious targets, right? Or she either set up to make the Tuku obvious targets, or she said, this sets me up to work with Tuku the rest of the game as 5 against 4. So I think, the thing is that Genevieve right now, she literally has social capital with every single player basically left in the game, it appears. And I think she's in a really good position. The question is, and the question was after the episode, are people going to realize this was her move? And it seems like yes. So, again, there's so many other aspects that went into this move. Yeah. I'm still leaning to the fact that it was a good move as long as she could damage control, but it is going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I think you make a lot of really great points. So I'll do like the devil's advocate side and say maybe why it wasn't a good move. Because I think it was in some ways, and like you're saying, I think Genevieve is a good player. She has a lot of game sense, and I think she has the social means to make things happen. I think the only downside that I see to her is that I do think she gets sometimes like a little like trigger happy. And obviously, I think the Keyshawn vote was good, obviously, because she wanted to keep Rome as a number. She wanted to keep Saul as a number, and Keyshawn was fine with her being a backup. And even though you could argue, well, she kind of took that and I took it personally, and she went after Keyshawn, like she still kind of reacted to it. I think this is kind of the same thing where, she's like, I want to kind of get out Saul as a threat. And also I want to get revenge for Rome, which I don't think you need to get revenge for Rome, because I think at that point you're already set yourself up well. But it's like, I think she has a lot of good game sense, but I do think she can sometimes be like a little reactionary in that way. And I think the devil's advocate point to this is that I think this move, even though you're right that it could set her up well with a lot of people, she still has Annie as a number. She still has, a couple other people that want to work with her. The biggest problem here is that she could lose Teenie as an ally. And if you lose Teenie as an ally, I think that could be kind of dangerous because Teenie is also connected with a lot of people. And like you're mentioning, the whole question I was asking leading up to the vote and after the episode was like, how in the hell did nobody bring this back to Genevieve? I thought the whole time she's going to get caught. Someone's going to mention, wait, how do you have the numbers for this plan? Oh, Genevieve's in on it. Like, I was shocked that it never blew up in her face. And we'll see what happens next week. But this is where we're mentioning the exit press, because after the episode, if you read Saul's exit press, he basically says that in the end, and we don't know who it was. We assume it was Gabe, but somehow Teenie and Saul caught wind that Genevieve was either in on the plan or she brought up the plan, and they were like, "Oh shoot, Genevieve was in on this. Should we go for Genevieve?" And obviously at that point at Tribal Council, the votes really weren't there to make it happen. But I think Teenie at this point is aware, and obviously Teenie's crushed that Saul is gone and Genevieve kind of was in on the plan. So while I think that going after a savvy player like Saul could benefit Genevieve in the long run, I just wonder if you've lost Teenie as an ally, is that going to really cause damage for her next week?
Right. And it's funny that you mentioned that it didn't blow up in her face. There was like a very small, like 2-minute, 3-minute window of time during this episode where I was like, is this going to blow up? Is this going to end up getting Genevieve voted out this episode? It is crazy that we don't see it get back where anybody realizes that this was Genevieve's plan. We literally have Genevieve talking to Sue, Genevieve talking to Kyle and Gabe literally yelling at Genevieve, like, this is your move. This is your move. And then, so because Caroline loses her vote in this episode, this vote becomes so much more complicated, right?
Yeah.
And she needs to bring one other person in. She brings in Andy, but it's like, oh, can I really trust Andy to be the swing vote? So I'm going to tell Rachel also. And then Rachel tells Sam. Sam, this was actually, I thought, a really good Sam episode. Sam blows up Rachel's spot, which you could make an argument whether that's good or I thought for his singular game, he caused chaos. It kind of got, I think he did a good job by causing chaos. And what causing chaos does, if you're Sam, it simply just like redirects any like attention from you. Even next episode, people are not going to be talking about Sam, I don't think. So I think he did a really good job by that. He kind of did screw over Rachel though, which is, I mean, that could be bad for him, but that's a whole nother conversation. But Genevieve literally, it looked like she somehow pulls it off without anybody realizing. Now let's get into the exit press. We hear from Soul and exit press that apparently he said that Teenie told him that during the live tribal that that Teenie heard it was Genevieve's move. Okay. And then Soul said to Teenie, like, oh, let's go get Genevieve then. And they could not get anybody on board to vote out Genevieve. We obviously don't see any of that because I'm sure they want to hold till next episode for us to hear from Teenie, hear from Genevieve, and Teenie to be like, I knew this was Genevieve, which I assume we're going to hear something like that within the first 2 minutes of the episode. Now, we could assume that we saw the conversation between Gabe and Teenie. That has to be where Teenie heard that this was Genevieve's move. Now, the question that I ask you here, this seems is I feel like this could be like Genevieve could potentially get out of this because should Teenie trust Gabe over Genevieve, right? It's like they get back to camp and it's like, oh, Teenie says to Genevieve, oh, I heard you were behind this move. I heard this was you. Oh, who told you that? It was Gabe. Oh, well, why do you believe Gabe? Like, right. I feel like there is a kind of path to Genevieve weaving out of it and being like, oh, Gabe's not trustworthy to you. Why would you trust what Gabe says? The question is, if other people start to like Kyle, for example, start to say the same thing, then I feel like it kind of could be harder for Genevieve to weave out of this one. So, it is interesting. I do think that while, Teenie might be angry with Genevieve immediately, I don't think it's in Teenie's best interest to immediately go against Genevieve necessarily. So I'm not sure how much it will impact Genevieve for like the next few episodes. I do think that her odds of, it was a big time move. She took a huge swing. I think that her odds of winning Genevieve's probably increased. And I do think her odds of also potentially not making the final tribal also increased. So it's like she's swinging big, right? So it's going to be so interesting to see. But I'm curious your thoughts on exit press and, that whole thing with Teenie actually seeming like, they knew about it.
Yeah, so I think the thing with Teenie is that, like you're mentioning, somebody who is a player in the game like Teenie and has like the good game awareness. Yeah, I think in the near term, Teeny might be like, fine, I can put this aside. I can not target Genevieve right now. Like you mentioned, the Tukus, they're a strong 4 in a group of 9. They're a really big threat. I think in the near term, I could see Teeny putting it aside, but I don't think Teeny's going to forget this. When the Teeny and Sol were as close as they were, and Genevieve, as she perceived, was close to her, that's a really big betrayal, especially when like it also doesn't make you feel good when you're basically talking in a circle and you're like, how do they have the votes for this? And the person that is in on the vote is standing like right there. You kind of feel like you got played in that way. I don't think long-term Teeny's going to want to go to the end with Genevieve. I think at some point Teeny will want to make a move, but maybe she can put it aside in the short term. I think that it's just so tough because I also want to get back to you talking about, Sam, Rachel bringing this to Sam. And obviously, like for all of us watching, that's like watching a slow moving car wreck because we know that Genevieve should not have brought it to Rachel because Rachel and Sol are close. And even when Rachel's saying to Sam, please don't say anything, it's not going to end well at that point. So that really caused a lot of chaos. And obviously, Sam felt like he had to save himself because his name was out there. I mean, the initial plan before this fell on Sol was people were saying, let's just go after Sam. We're kind of whittling down like the Gata numbers, and Sam is a big guy. He's a threat. So Sam felt like he had to kind of save himself there. And that's kind of how this starts unraveling. And we can continue to get into all that and like more of the chaos. But I think when it comes to Genevieve, just because we're still kind of talking about this as like her move here, she goes to Andy, like you mentioned, and she says to Andy, like, I want to get out Sol. And Andy's like, I'm fine getting out Sol because I don't want to go to the end with him, but I want to use him for a few more votes. And that's why she goes to Rachel, because she's like, I don't know for a fact if I have Andy on board. She knows that she has Gabe and Sue and Kyle. So she has 3 plus her. So when Caroline loses her votes, she only needs 5 in a group of 9. And that's why she goes to Andy. Andy's like, maybe I'm on board. I need to see the numbers. And then that's where she goes to Rachel. And that's where I think Genevieve, people are giving her credit because she kind of was like, listen, Caroline doesn't have a vote. I'm relying on Andy, but I'm going to go for it. It's kind of like last season when Maria took out Tiffany, and Maria used that metaphor where she's like, I'm not going to wait around for the green light. I'm just going to hit the gas, even though it's red. I'm just going to go for it. That's kind of like what I felt with Genevieve, where Genevieve's like, I'm not going to wait for the light to turn green. I'm just going to go and get Sol no matter what. And that's where I was kind of thinking, yeah, maybe it was a good move in the moment, but like we see with the Exit Press, I don't know if this is going to kind of blow up on her at some point. But I do think in the end, the real winners tonight, because again, I think Teeny lost an ally, Andy lost an ally for a few votes, Genevieve lost Sol for the time being, but I think, the Gabes and the Kyles of the world, I think do benefit from this. But.
Yeah, I'm trying to, it is pretty interesting. I saw some people talking about this as well. Like, there were so many people that wanted to work with Sol that I almost find it insane that Genevieve was even able to pull this off. Like, especially with Caroline losing her vote. Like, this should not have been as easy as it was. Like, I wouldn't say it was easy because of the chaos that happened, but the fact that it did end 8-1, right? I'm pretty surprised that like players like Rachel, who I thought that after the Rachel Sol conversation that we got, with the whole gifting the advantage and the conversation that they had, I thought with the whole Andy Sol conversation, I was like, you know what? Like, they want to work with Sol so badly. Why should they be jumping to get at Sol? Like, they could easily just make sure this doesn't happen. Like, Genevieve would not have the numbers. You can make sure this doesn't happen. I thought Sam's plan for the Gata members and for Teeny, I thought like the plan that Sam came up with to vote at Sue was actually pretty smart. And again, they would have had the numbers, let's see. So it was final 10. I believe they would have had the numbers to do Sue if Andy and Rachel, like it was just, everybody just was like kind of caved into the plan. But I thought the Sue thing was interesting. It's like, I don't think Sue has a chance to win, but it goes back to the thing that we talk about every season. It's like, Sue is for sure a threat to take your spot at the final 3, right? And, Tuku is now 4 of 9. So I thought the Sam, plan was super interesting.
Yeah. I
think the overarching point I'm trying to make is I'm surprised that Rachel and Andy did not put up more of a fight to keep Sol. That's all.
So, yeah, and that's actually what I wanted to talk about. So I think with Rachel, because I was watching actually at a bar with my friend, and they also were like, why Why did Rachel and Andy not put up more of a fight for Saul or even Teeny in that way? And I think at that point with that live tribal, and that's actually like one of my, I mean, we've gone back and forth on this. I feel like I like the chaos at camp. I'm fine with the whispering at tribal. I mean, the getting up gets a little bit annoying for me, but the chaos can be fun, even though it's not amazing from a game purity standpoint. But in the end, it almost caused like the easiest vote to happen. Like all that chaos, and it still ended up being Saul 8-1. So it was like still a very straightforward vote. Yeah, I know the initial plan was like Sam, and then it went to like Saul, and then maybe Sue and Kyle. In the end, it was a very simple Saul vote. And I think what happened was because of the chaos, people were like, look, Genevieve has the Tukus minus Caroline, and she has Andy. At that point, she has the vote. So if you're out of the vote, it doesn't make sense to be off the vote at that point. So that's where like Sam jumps on board. And then for Teeny and Rachel, it's like, shit, I don't want to lose Saul, but everyone else is on board. I don't want to be left out of the vote. I'm going to jump on board. So that's what, because everyone was like, why was it like unanimous? And it's like, well, they have the votes. You may as well get on board. And I think that's why it was like that. The other thing you mentioned I wanted to talk about was you mentioned like Sam targeting Sue. And that's been for me like another theme of the season, like not just betrayals, but like people keep mentioning glue. Like I obviously early in the season, Sam's like, I'm the glue guy. Last week, people were like, let's go for Rachel over Sierra because we see Rachel as like the god of glue, which I disagreed with. I think I agree with you that Sue does feel like a glue piece, not kind of for Tuku, because here's the thing. Even though Gabe feels like the de facto leader of Tuku, because obviously Genevieve even says, if I get Gabe's vote, the others will fall in line. I think once Tiana left, Gabe, Sue, and Caroline are a trio, and Kyle and Sue don't get along, but I think Kyle is fine with Gabe. So clearly, if you get Gabe on board, the others are going to fall in line. So I think you could argue, well, isn't Gabe like the glue of that blue tribe? But I think, as you're saying, Sam brings up a good point, because if you take Sue off the board, Caroline and Gabe don't really have that much in common. The biggest reason why Tiana goes over Gabe is because Caroline knows Sue doesn't want Gabe to go. So she's like, all right, I'll get Tiana out here. Sue's not on board. But once, if Sam was to take Sue off the board, I could see Caroline being like, I'm fine if Gabe goes at that point. So I understand where Sam's coming from, where you're like, why would you go for Sue out of everybody on the board? But it really then kind of breaks that line between Gabe and Caroline. And then Kyle, I think, would be fine to put out Gabe at some point. So I see where Sam was coming from.
Yeah. I'm curious, do you think that Genevieve is going to go with the Tukus now, or do you think her plan is going to still be to work with Gata and Lavo and target the Tuku next episode? Because you could see it. You could make an argument, I think, for either one. And obviously she has a clear vision of what she wants to happen to vote after this, right? But I think this is another one I've gone back and forth on. I think ultimately she wants to target. I think she literally has a vote by vote plan for the rest of the game. Like, I think in her head, she's like, well, now we're going to force because there's 4 left on Tuku, we're going to have to force a vote on Tuku. That's going to eliminate. She's probably thinking that's going to eliminate whoever she wants to eliminate on Tuku. And then she could also just even swing right back and just kind of play the middle. But I'm curious, what do you think what do you think her plan is?
So the thing is that Genevieve and Andy seem like the swing people. Like, obviously, ever since the merge, we've seen Genevieve and Andy kind of talking. And you're right. I think Genevieve has plans for what she wants to do. And Andy, now being in that swing position, has options as well. And if I had to guess, because I mean, she talks strategy with Sue this episode, but I don't think she and Sue are like extremely close. Although Genevieve, Sue, and Caroline have worked together now the last 2 votes. I feel like Genevieve, to protect herself, in one way, I could see her going for Tuku, but on the other hand, there's a big war happening between Sue and Kyle. Now, as I've said, as I've gotten older, I don't remember the previews that much anymore, but the one thing I remember from the preview is Sue's like, I hate Kyle. Kyle's got to go. I hate Kyle. So obviously, Sue and Kyle are going to continue to kind of fire at each other. So if you're Genevieve, do you want to take out a Tuku and weaken their numbers? Or do you want to like leave them in to fight? Or maybe you can accomplish both. Maybe you can take out like a Gabe or a Caroline, and then you still leave Sue and Kyle kind of like shooting at each other. So I think Andy and Genevieve next week, yes, Sam still is mad at Andy, but now earlier in the episode, and we can talk about it, you see Andy and Rachel trying to get back together. So I could see Andy saying to Genevieve, I don't want to go after Rachel just yet, and Sam's not going to pull people against us or whatever. I could see them going for Tuku, but if you want to leave Sue and Kyle in the game together, maybe Genevieve wants to go for Gabe next week. Although Genevieve brought the plan to Gabe today to get out Saul, I don't know if she would want to work with Gabe long term.
I think, okay. The more I think about it, the more we play this out, I think the right move. So I think for sure, I think Genevieve set it up to get a Tuku out at the next vote. I don't know if she's working with Tuku long term. I think she wants a Tuku out next vote. I think you have to vote Tuku out next vote. Otherwise, you risk. I know that Sue and Kyle don't like each other, but if you get down to 8 and there's 4 Tuku, there's no reason for the Tukus not to band together for the rest of the game. I think you have to target a Tuku. I think that based on the way that this season has gone, right? And you think about the players that have gone out, Sierra, Sol, I think that it is possible that Caroline gets targeted next week, right? And especially with Sue having her idol, I don't know how many people know about that. We haven't really heard much about Sue's idol in a few episodes now. Clearly, there was the whole paint thing. How much do we know that spread? Did it spread? I don't know. Are people going to suspect that Sue has an idol? I don't know. If people don't suspect it, then that could change things. But again, Caroline is one of those players, really well liked, under the radar, social, right? We can sue if people know that she has an idol. Or they could just target Gabe, who also seems to be a glue guy. So I think between those two, I would have to guess. I feel like that either Kyle's going to win immunity again, or like, again, if you're everybody else and Sue and Kyle are consistently fighting, you're like, all right, just keep them both in the game, because eventually they're going to want to continue. They're just going to keep wanting to vote each other out. So I fear for Caroline, I think, and Gabe, for that reason. I think one of them two, or maybe they'll target Sue, or maybe they'll know she has the idol and they'll try to flush it. I think a Tuku is going to get targeted next, and I don't think Kyle is going home next episode.
Yeah, and that's the other point too, where there's 2 advantages in the game, and that's another reason why this has been a relatively clean season, because there has not been much in the way of advantages, and only 2 idols in the game are Sue and Rachel. Nobody knows about Rachel's idol, and the only people that know about Sue's idol is, I think, Caroline. Does Gabe?
Caroline knows. We don't even know if Gabe knows.
I don't know if Gabe knows, but but so the idols are relatively quiet, whereas last season everybody knew everything about everybody's idols. So that could play a lot of factors if, to your point, if Caroline gets targeted, or even if, a Tuku in general gets targeted, they have an idol to potentially use to save one of them. And then Rachel, it's so tough because, again, Rachel for 2 votes now, and obviously Rachel's a very calculated player, because in both of these votes, she has known that Saul was in danger, obviously, because she jumped on board. She knew Saul was going to be gone, but obviously playing the idol for Saul really blows her name up as a target. She doesn't want to do that. She's already been talked about. And then last week, like we see at the start of the episode, she played her shot in the dark, like we confirmed in the last podcast, because she wanted to see people's reactions. Like you said, evolution of the game, great use for the shot in the dark, but she didn't see any shocked reactions, so she knew she was not in danger. But again, she and Sierra felt something was wrong. So she could have used her idol on Sierra, didn't do it. So this is now 2 weeks in a row where Rachel has lost an ally. But Rachel is not a very, again, I think she's very calculated. She's not very, reactionary. You could argue that maybe next week, because she's lost 2 allies in a row, she could just use her idol next week. Again, they also saw last season, a bunch of people go home with idols in their pockets. So I could see Rachel, whether it's for herself or for an ally, I could see Rachel maybe using it. But then again, she is very measured in that way. So I don't know if she would use an idol. I do agree with you that I think Tuku's going to get looked at next week, whether it's from the other people or whether they're looking at each other. But I do think that's going to come into play. And then it comes down to, does Sue need to use her idol at all?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I don't know if I see Rachel using it next episode. I do think they're gonna target Tuku. I do think they're gonna target Tuku. It's there's so many dynamics at play here. It's all been so interesting to think about, really.
And you know what? Last week, like you were saying, we both did not think Saul was in danger. So if people were to ask us, like, oh, who do we think's in danger next week? I could see a lot of people like being in danger. We've already made the case for a number of people being in danger. Ironically, the one person who I don't think's in danger, I feel like is Andy. I think even Genevieve, like her name could get brought up if this got blown up, and Teeny maybe looks at her next week. So I could even see Genevieve maybe getting her name thrown around. And then obviously Sam's name has come up. All the Tuku's names have come up. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase. I think Teeny and Andy are the two people in the game where I feel like I don't know who's going after Teeny and Andy right now.
Yeah, those two seem to be the safest in the game. I think that Genevieve wants to work with Andy because she thinks she could beat Andy. I think Rachel wants to work with Andy because she thinks she could beat Andy. So I'm kind of wondering if like Andy is like the low key, like for example, we think Sue is like a threat to take people's spot at the end because people would drag her there. I'm wondering if like everybody out there sees Andy as that person, right?
Well, again, I know Andy had a genuine like, emotional moments in the first episode, but like you could argue if that was, I mean, I know it wasn't intentional, but you could argue that may have been 40 chess big brain all the time because everybody has been just doubting Andy this whole game, all leading back to that moment. And then, he obviously has the Annika vote. He has the Sierra vote. Like Andy has been getting a better and better arc the whole season. And I think like you're just mentioning, Dylan, people are just constantly like, oh, I want to be with Andy because I can beat him. Like you just said, Rachel wants to work with Andy because she can beat him. Genevieve feels the same way. Sam picks Andy to be his partner in the challenge this week. And we haven't talked about the challenge yet. But Sam picks Andy because he solely thinks I can beat Andy if we get to the final stage together. So everybody thinks they can beat Andy. And that's really setting up Andy's like underdog story.
Yeah, it is super interesting. And the one thing I was also going to say that I forgot to mention before, there was an interesting, back to who's going to get targeted next week. There's an interesting confessional, I believe the Sierra vote out, where Caroline said, oh, Genevieve wants to get rid of Rachel. So do I. Genevieve's really smart. I think that, Genevieve, she's sneaky, knows what she's doing or something like that. And that's kind of the only time all season that we've heard before obviously next week, which I'm sure we'll hear it a bunch. Caroline's confessional. That was the only time we really heard anybody like talk about Genevieve as like a huge threat or a strategist that she kind of knows what she's doing.
Yeah.
I'm curious if that's just setting up Caroline to get cut by Genevieve or the opposite, if Caroline is eventually the one to take her down. So I just thought, I just remember that confessional like during this episode and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah. But yeah, let's talk about a few other things in this episode since we spent 30 plus minutes on the strategy. Immunities challenge in pairs, had to pick their pairs. Bottom four go on a journey to potentially lose their vote / earn their vote back. Obviously, we learned that only one person was going to lose their vote. Thank God. I think that was a worry. Which I mean, it ended up making the episode super interesting that one person lost their vote and the right person for the episode lost their vote. But what were your thoughts on the immunity challenge, the, lose a vote journey, etc.? I know. As a purist, I think I know what your answer is going to be.
I mean, look, I'm never going to sit here and I'm not going to ever be happy that people lose their votes. I mean, again, we have not had everybody vote in a tribal council since the Asia votes. So it's been since episode 3 and we're on episode 9 where every single person at tribal has been able to vote. So that's a problem already. And obviously, like you said, it wasn't like all 4 lost their vote. It is only 1. So it could have been a lot worse. I mean, in terms of the challenge itself, I don't mind shaking it up. I don't mind having a challenge where let's put you into pairs. Let's kind of do 3 segments. Each time it's elimination. You knock out this person, you knock out this person, and then we'll break you up into individuals, and then you'll do an endurance for immunity. So I think other than the lose vote part, I think the structure was kind of cool. Letting you pick your own partners causes drama. It lets you show your cards. I think that all was a lot of fun, minus the lose votes. I will say, Dylan, in terms of funny moments, I don't know about you, but I would have been livid if I was Sam and Andy, if I'm digging for the bag and if the thing broke and then Jeff's like, sucks to be you.
Yeah.
I would be livid. It's almost like in Micronesia where Penner's throwing like the rocks at the tiles and they're not breaking. Meanwhile, the other tribes are breaking, and Penner's like, I mean, my ass, it's not breaking. Like, if there was ever a moment in a challenge where the challenge department's like, my thing is like broken or rigged, I would have been livid if I was him.
I actually think that they just ripped the bag themselves. Like, because they, if you saw like Andy was like trying to like pull it up from the sand before he actually dug it out. So I think that they just ripped it themselves, which is why Jeff didn't care. But I thought the challenge was really fun to watch. Kind of a cool, crazy comeback from Kyle and Gabe that was in the middle of there that I thought was really fun. Gabe doing the Ray Lewis dance, funny. Really good showdown between Gabe and Kyle as well. What I will beg Survivor to stop doing, and I know probably 75% of the people that watch the season do not realize this, but they need to stop like hinting like, oh, we're all gonna go for Gabe tonight, and then Gabe wins immunity right after. They do that like every episode. Like so when Kyle and Gabe are in a showdown, and we literally just heard Kyle in a confessional who was like, I could definitely beat Gabe, and then other people are like, let's get Gabe out tonight. I'm like, oh, here we go. Gabe's gonna for sure beat him, right? So plea to Survivor, stop doing that editing, because they've been doing it for years now, and we know it's coming. So
I love it.
I enjoyed the challenge though, and
I will say really quickly, I think you are fair. You are right that if you break, you know what? Actually, you're right. It's almost like with Jake 2 seasons ago, where Jake broke his own challenge, and Jeff's like you're out of here. Like, if you break your own challenge or you destroy something yourself, I agree. Like, that's on you. I just felt bad because I was like, oh my God, if I was digging for a bag and now I physically cannot get it out of the hole, like that would have been annoying.
Yeah.
But I see your point.
And I kind of enjoyed the House of Cards type thing as well.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was good. I thought it was like, I don't need to see like people do math puzzles. Like I thought that was a good way to do it. Hilarious part of this, like, hilarious like underlying theme, just like a side thing that's going on this season is they are very consciously making an effort to show Caroline hyping everybody up in literally every moment she could, and it's really funny. Like last week, like I like every time, like I forget what it was. I need to find Kelly from season 45. She had a few very funny tweets about this, that like Caroline is literally trying to hype everybody up at literally every single moment she could. And then this week, like Rachel looks like she was screwed with the way that like the card, like the house, like kind of came out, and it looked like she was not gonna be able to get it on. And she was like, yeah, and then she got it, and then Caroline's like, epic, and then she like loses her vote like a second later. I thought that was so funny. Yeah, wait, so I'm gonna read the tweet now. So Kelly tweeted like last episode, 2 episodes ago, I'm obsessed with how excited Caroline is for everybody else. Sue found an idol, go girl. Genevieve has a good strategic idea, yes queen. So, and then this episode, she quote tweeted that tweet and wrote, Rachel, you put that piece on, girl, epic. That's literally, it's so funny because they keep showing that with Caroline. I just think it's really funny. And then she puts it on, the whole thing collapses and she loses her vote like immediately after.
Yeah, Caroline's the ally you need but don't deserve. No, she's really great. And I will say, I did love seeing the House of Cards come back. We had not seen that in a long time. I really miss seeing that immunity challenge. Obviously, this is a little bit different. This is almost like Jenga in that way, but I love a good classic challenge, and seeing House of Cards was fun. And obviously, like you said, with the editing, like you knew the minute they're like, this all hinges on Caroline's vote, and then she loses her vote. Like you knew it was happening. Kind of like when Kyle's like, oh, I'm going to pick Gabe because I can beat Gabe in the challenge. And so listen, Dylan, we're fans. We know how Survivor likes to edit these things. Or like, I remember even in episode 1 where Asia had like a 3-1 lead or whatever on TK in that challenge, and she's like, "Oh, I got this." I'm like,
"Yeah, yeah."
When you watch enough reality TV, you know like how it's gonna happen, basically. So
at the same time, I do have to give them credit though, because I genuinely thought Sue was going home, and I did not know who was going to go home. So the fact that Soul went home, I was pretty shocked. I thought that one of the best edited Survivor like segments I've ever seen was before Tribal, when they were all going, literally, it was like boom, 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 going back and forth to each other. Genevieve goes to Kyle. Genevieve goes to Gabe. Genevieve goes to Andy. Genevieve goes to Rachel. Rachel goes to Sam. Sam goes to Sol. Name switches to Sue. Now name switches to Kyle. I thought that was one of the best like edited segments for like 5 minutes straight, just like pure strategy, name changing. I literally had no idea it was going to happen. No idea. Like my brother was watching after me and he was like live texting me as he watched. Yeah. And he was like, I genuinely have no clue who is going home. And that's how I felt. That's usually not the case for us who watch. So I thought that was great.
And in terms of the ending, the other thing I'll say is that, it must be such a thrill out there, or even like scary when like, the sun's setting, because obviously they have until sundown and then they go to tribal. And then they as we've heard from like, we've talked to Kelly, we've talked to other people. When you go to tribal, you get put in lockdown. Like once you go to tribal, you cannot talk until you're at tribal. Same thing when you go back to camp. So that's going to be a rush where, you're talking strategy, the sun setting, we see the TV show, like you see like, the shadows get more cast and like literally time is running out and then it just stops. So that's got to be really cool. And then also seeing it on TV where you just see, the sun continue to set and people keep talking about plans. And yeah, we had no idea what was going to happen. I still think it's crazy though, that Kyle wins 3 challenges, he loses 1, and does not get a single vote cast against him. So I don't know if that's a testament to Kyle's like social game. I don't know if that means people just saw Sol as like the bigger threat, but like clearly this was your chance to get Kyle out. I still don't think he's going to run the table from final 9 on, but like if Kyle somehow wins most of the challenges, you're going to be kicking yourself because this was your chance, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it is interesting. I'm curious to see what happens with them this week. All right, let's use the last few minutes. And I've been telling people this, everybody this week. So I'm going to see what you think of my take. I think that out of the 9 people left, I think there are 5 people who have a chance to win and 4 people who I do not think have a chance to win. And when I say a chance, I don't mean like 0.0%. I don't think anybody left has a 0.0% chance. But I think that there are 5 people who I personally could see winning. And then there are 4 people who I don't really think have any sort of a chance. The 5 people that I could see winning, in no order in particular, Genevieve has a chance to win. I think Andy has a chance to win. I think Teeny has a chance to win. Nobody's targeting her. Great social game. I think, obviously, look, Genevieve and Andy, they speak for themselves. I think we've seen why. I think both of them. Teeny, I think, again, nobody's targeting her, so I'm going to say she has a chance to win. I think that Rachel has a chance to win, right? Rachel has an idol. We've seen her to be potentially the second best strategist or first best strategist on the season. I think that my last person I think has a chance to win is Caroline. But I think she's somewhat in the middle. I think she has a chance because Tuku does have 4, right? So if they do make a run, it's like, who are they going to make it because of? And I think that I don't trust Gabe's social game as much as Caroline's. And I think we've heard some really good stuff from Caroline strategically, whereas Gabe, I can't think. I'll start the list of people that I don't think could win at Gabe at 1. I can't see it. Right? We've been told the whole season, I want to make a big move. I'm using people as pawns. Usually that's never good. And I do think Gabe is doing a better job than they're editing him to be. Somebody made like a meme, like every episode, Gabe talks strategy to Tuku, lets Tuku talk to the other people, sits in the hammock the whole time. They all come back to him, and then what he wants to happen happens pretty much every time. We're not really seeing it that way though. So I don't think Gabe has a strong chance. I also think he's going to be a big target come this week. Clearly, he was going to be targeted, I think, if he didn't win immunity. I think his name was going to be firmly out there. So I think his chances are dwindling. I think that Sam has a massive uphill battle. I don't really think he could win. I think Sam he's basically in the spot where all he could do is cause chaos at this point. I don't think Sue has a chance. I think she has probably the least chance out of anybody left. again, there is a chance she could play the idol correctly and everything's perfect, but literally we've barely seen her for the last 2 episodes. So I don't think she has a chance. And then there's one person that I left out, and that is Kyle, who I think basically has to win out to get to the final tribal. And I don't think that's going to happen. And I think that even if Kyle got there, right, people could be like, well, what do you do except for win challenges? So I don't think that Kyle has a strong chance. So I think it's like 5 and 4 for me right now.
Yeah, it's an interesting list. Like, obviously, I agree with you. We're not saying anyone is 0.0 because nobody here has been getting like that much of a horrible edit where people like really hate them and whatnot. Yeah, Gabe has probably the least chance. But yeah, I do think he's a better player than what we're seeing. Obviously, the show is really giving him that villain edit, like where, you know, he's, like you said, he's calling people pawns. You know, he's giving the Jim Halper face to the camera when he's hugging Rachel, and like. Clearly, the show wants us to think of him as like a villain, whether he's a good villain or like a really sloppy villain. He wants to play like Russell, but again, like you said, he has done some good things. You know, picking up Sue as a piece early was huge for him. People bring him plans. You know, Genevieve even says, like, you know, if Gabe votes with us, the Tucos will fall in line. So Gabe clearly has power in the game, and I think he has a good mind for the game. It just comes down to he's getting a really, really bad TV edit. I do think he has a small chance to win. Not great, but probably one of the smallest ones. I think Sue as well. I just don't know if people are going to give Sue the money if she gets there. I just don't know if people are respecting Sue a lot in the game. And also, we've seen in Exit Press, people are like, Sue kind of like broke down a lot out there and whatnot. So I don't know if people will really want to give her the money. Kyle's interesting because I agree with you that Kyle is going to keep getting brought up as a target when he loses, but he lost this week and no one wrote his name down. I think you're right. Kyle's a hard path to get there, but if Kyle gets there, I think he could win. And I think it's the same thing for Sam. Sam has a very hard path to get there, but Sam already has 2 locked in votes in the jury. He'll get Sierra's vote, and I think Sol likes Sam. So Sam already has votes in the jury. So he has a hard path to get there, but I think he could win. And then I agree with you. I think the 5 people you mentioned have the best chances to win. You know, Teeny has allies in the jury. I think people are, you know, getting warmer and warmer on Andy. Genevieve's playing well. Caroline's very cool, calm, and collected. And then I forgot the other person. Rachel's also playing well as well. So yeah, no, I think to your point, no one's out of it. You just have 5 that have a much better chance than the other 4. And then I think for those 4, 2 can get votes if they get there, and then the other 2 are kind of struggling a bit. So.
Yeah. All right. So we're mostly on the same page.
Yeah.
Anything else you wanted to highlight before we head off for the week?
Yeah, one key thing I want to highlight that I mentioned, but we didn't really drill down into was early in the episode, we see Andy and Rachel talk on the beach, and they've had a very rocky relationship. Like, you know, Andy, like, you know, comes to her, and I will say this, by the way, too. My friend, like, you think I'm a purist. Like, I feel like I on the spectrum, not spectrum, on the scale. There's like the purist, and then there's like the new era, like big moves, advantages, like all that stuff. My friend who started watching before me, he's like purist, like season like 2 is like 1 is one of the best seasons ever. Like, he's purist. And I feel like I kind of fall like in between the middle and like that. So I like things to be as old school as possible, but I'm fine with some new school stuff. I will say he's been loving that they have not been doing a lot of the backstories this season. We've had almost no backstories. Instead, we've been seeing a lot of flashbacks in season. We've been seeing a lot of like Andy and Rachel talk. They flash back to when he woke her up and then he puts a target on their back. They flash back to the Annika vote. So they've been doing a lot of in-season flashback, which I think has been pretty cool. Before I continue, what are your thoughts on that?
Interesting. Have we had a single backstory this season?
Maybe not like 1 or 2, episode 1 or 2. It's been a long time.
Interesting.
Which, hey, maybe the fans said something. Jeff finally heard them. But back to Andy and Rachel. I think this is very interesting because, again, we see Rachel say, look, we've had a very rocky relationship. I wanted to work with him on day 1. He's acting very crazy. He's waking me up in the middle of the night. People are looking at us as a duo. He then blows up on John, and I can't really trust him. I then try to bring him back into the fold, and then he backstabs me on the Annika vote. And then he backstabs me on the Sierra vote. How do you think Andy and Rachel are going to continue in the game? Because on one hand, I could see both of them trying to finally work together. But if you're Rachel, I mean, this guy is like really, you know, throwing like kind of lied to you twice. And I'll give Rachel credit. I would like to think I would be a really strategic player. But I'm not gonna lie, Dylan. If somebody like lied to me or kind of left me out of the vote twice, I would have a very hard time working with them. If you do it once, it happens. If you do it twice, I would have a hard time. So how do you think Andy and Rachel are going to continue in the rest of this game together?
It's tough. This has one of those working relationships that I think this is going to end badly for one of them. I just, based on everything we've seen before, like history, it might repeat itself. I think it might, it might again. Yeah, if I'm Rachel, I think, she doesn't really have a choice. That's the thing, right? It's like she has to put her trust in somebody. So, all right, we're going to put our trust in Andy again. But I will say, if for whatever reason Rachel gets screwed by Andy later in the season, Andy, I find it difficult I think Andy can win because of the arc he's getting, right? I think he has a high chance to get to the final 3. So that's why I think he has a chance to win. I do look at it and say he's going to need to do a lot of work to make sure he gets the jury respect, because we've heard everybody talk about how sloppy of a player he is. If he screws over Rachel again for a third time, I can't imagine that he's going to be able to get her vote at the end, right? I just think it's so interesting to me. Or maybe Rachel gets her revenge on Andy, and but I don't really think anybody's targeting Andy. Maybe they'll work together for a few votes and then one of them will get voted out. Yeah. I don't really see, I don't know what to think of it. I think it could go literally in any direction based on.
So I think the key turning point for Andy in the game was flipping on Gata last week, because obviously he flips on Sam and Sierra and Rachel. And then early in the episode, while Sam is like all pissed that Andy did that, you see everybody at camp like, Andy, like, thanks for voting with us. Like, you're awesome. Thanks for doing this. So Andy, I think, has now started to get more respect in the game from everybody besides his original tribe. So I do think if Andy gets to the end, if he keeps up his game of like playing the middle, making moves, I could see him getting votes. I think the danger for him, because obviously Sam is already upset at him and Sierra's upset at him. I think unless you can put all your bias aside, because obviously we see bitter juries, we see people get hurt. Like the best jurors are the ones that can put everything aside and vote solely on the game. I think the problem is in the game when you like take somebody under your wing and they really like backstab you, that hurts the most. It's almost like the classic thing with like Dawn and Brenda, where Brenda like took care of Dawn and then Dawn like gets her out and then Brenda's like super hurt. The way that Sam and Sierra tried to take care of Andy. Now, obviously, then there was the whole like they discounted him, they dragged him along, so maybe there's no hard feelings. But like, I do think when you take someone under your wing and they turn against you, it's really hard to give them $1 million. So I think Andy is getting more respect from people in the game. I just don't know if Sierra and Sam and potentially Rachel will want to vote for him in the end. But I think he's doing better in terms of getting more social capital.
For sure.
Yeah.
Anything else that we missed?
No, I think that's it. I think, again, we talk about this every week. I think now that we've had a couple of really big votes, obviously the emotional Tiana vote, the big flip against Sierra last week, and now this vote with Saul with the crazy tribal, I think we were looking for some highs of the season. I think we're starting to get to that point. So I do think we are in for hopefully a pretty interesting end game.
Yeah, I'm really excited for the rest of the season. So that'll do it for today, and we'll be back probably next Sunday.
Yeah, probably back next week for episode 10. Grab your torches and head back to camp.
Good night.